Within the last few years, I've been on RuneScape looking through some of the oldest content and dead content to possibly find some discoveries to help me in my overall gameplay. But come to find out, most of these discoveries as of late are mistakes that are made on behalf of Jagex with more recent updates rather than older updates. And well, it seems like a lot of things are getting past their QA quite frequently. You can see an example of this by just looking at my past few videos and the Last Man Standing update, as this has provided two separate bugs which I was able to feature for perks in these videos. And this isn't even mentioning the more obvious mistakes of recent updates, ones such as the Twistable just being spawned on the ground, and max cash stack spawns for people who suffered of death with stackable items. What? The list over the last 2 to 3 years with update mistakes such as this could go on and on and on. But once again, we're here today for another mistake Jagex made. A lot of these clips were just for research and therefore won't have the greatest quality in this video, so that is a fair warning. That is because originally I wasn't even planning on uploading these clips at all until just the other day. But of course in the end, I said fuck it, why not? So today's video most likely wouldn't have been possible without some tip-off information from a man and his PVM clan. This was just a couple days after the Ashihama update on the 8th of February. Luckily for me, this man was a fan of mine and said him and his clan accidentally came across a way to make sure the boss was not even in the room itself by entering and leaving at the same time, and coincidentally had ran into something within the game chat called an invalid teleport. So this information and game chat message was extremely familiar, as I have watched previous videos on RS3 and pre-EOC relaying the exact same message. And an invalid teleport can in fact lead to a PAFT, which is a personalized area force teleport. But in pre-EOC and RS3 itself, people had gotten that invalid teleport message many times in many different scenarios. Therefore I could look back on these scenarios and figure out where to go from there and how in fact this PAFT might work. An invalid teleport is a game message you get whenever you are supposed to be loaded onto some coordinates of a personalized area. But in fact that area was deleted and therefore the area can't load. So in order to turn an invalid teleport into a PAFT, you have to somehow load a new area on top of the coordinates of the old area that was already deleted. So the fact that this actually ended up working means it's the only repeatable PAFT in Oldschool Runescape's 7-year history, and of course it's in the newest of content. Now you can easily tell by going back in RuneScape history and looking at old PAFTs from pre-EOC and RS3 that 9 times out of 10, all of these start with a stall into an instance which has at least 2 people inside of that instance. That is because, as you can see here in the Dungeoneering PAFT of 2011, well, you have one party member stall the entrance of his character into the dungeon, the other party member go in and out to close that area all before the stall of the first member ends, and therefore by the time that first member's stall ends, he'll then be teleported into a new personalized area of someone else, or into an invalid teleport of unexisting coordinates. So the biggest mistake of Jagex today? Well, you don't even have to trigger a stall yourself like in past experiences. Literally by just clicking Ashihama, there is some aesthetic stall effect that shows you bowing down into the boss, and well, this stalls the instance from you entering it, giving you about a 2-tick clearance to enter the boss room once someone leaves it and closes that instance. That is what leads to the invalid teleport every time, as once again the instance is closed by the time your stall finishes whenever you are bowing on the ground. but how do you overlap a new instance over the coordinates of the old instance that Ashihama was on instead of getting that invalid teleport every single time? Well, that in fact is what I struggled with understanding the most out of all of this, as it seemed like almost randomly every now and then I was able to do this, but in 99 out of 100 times I would always get that invalid teleport over a PAFT. Now in RS3, you have to cycle through the entire 2000 slot instance map in the matter of seconds that you are PAFTing, meaning I would somehow technically have to cycle through 2000 instances in the 2-tick window where the stall occurs. And well, unless I had 2000 people coordinated at the exact same time to do this and not even miss it by 1 digit, this would be pretty much impossible. So that is why I would definitely have to discover a new way and exactly how this new way worked, rather than mapping the 2000 instances in 2 ticks. And let's just say, I'm still not even completely sure how this works at this point in time.
Invalid.
So if you do some simple testing with the tile coordinator admin tool, you can see exactly that instances map around 192 by 192 tiles, and they start at a bottom left quadrant and move to the top right quadrant after 2000 instances have occurred, then repeat back down to the bottom left. But the way this pattern occurs is it moves from left to right on each row and then goes up the y-axis to then move left to right once again until it hits that threshold of 2000, and then finally repeats back down to the bottom. So an instance will close only whenever there is no one in that instance, and it will close the one left of that instance if someone opens one to the right. And basically this means every time technically someone opens an instance, it should close and move right at least 1 coordinate, not overlap in any shape or form. But for some reason in my testing on very specific worlds, not just the full ones, but very specific servers and worlds, what I noticed that sometimes these instances map exactly over the prior coordinates. Now, typically when an instance closes, it means something has opened to the right of it and therefore closed the prior instance with nobody inside. So basically, every time you open a new instance, you should technically be on a totally different set of tile coordinates before wrapping back around 2000 to the one before it. So this is why this did not make sense to me at all at this point, because somehow in some specific worlds, during specific times of the day, I was able to overlap back over different coordinates on the map, which wouldn't be possible under normal circumstances. So I spent hours and hours trying to figure out how these would sometimes map from right to left, and I just couldn't figure it out. I even had tried things such as mapping 2000 instances back over one I had just left open until the right time. I had tried mapping some left and then closing them, even upwards of 10 instances left and closing them at the exact same time to maybe have a chance at going left instead of right. I had tried pretty much anything. No matter what I did, in the worlds that this would never work from right to left and instead would always go the traditional route of left to right, well, nothing would change that pattern. The only thing this seemed dependent on at all was the worlds, and not even the population, because some of these worlds which this worked in, there was a low population of people. I even had went under another Twitter alias and asked Ash if he had a conclusion to this problem and why sometimes instances mapped backwards. It seemed he had one theory, but even with Ash's masterful wisdom, that theory didn't hold up in my testing. So, what did I do? I went ahead and used the Demon Slayer cutscene to determine whenever I could go in and out of an instance and get remapped back towards the previous instance coordinates. How I would do this is by looking at the Demon Slayer NPCs on the minimap to see if they move, as whenever you go into a new instance, they spawn back in the same tiles. If I went back on the other side of this stone to open a new cutscene, well, you could see that the NPCs reset their location each time if it is a new instance. And in fact, I would move from one coordinated instance back to the same coordinate with the NPCs resetting themselves, meaning the instance had closed and reopened itself on the exact same tile. And I could pinpoint which worlds this happened more frequently in with some more tests and running back and forth within this instance. So now, even though I didn't have a definitive answer on why or how this happens, I was able to pinpoint worlds in order to increase my likelihood 5 times to enter an instance that was coordinated over the previous Ashihama instance, and therefore PAFT. But there was still one major problem that occurred, and maybe was partially a reason for us having so many invalid teleports, despite having this new strategy. Basically, all instances have 4 floors, going from 0 to 3, and Ashihama is very unique in itself as being a floor 3 instance, which are very rare in RuneScape. And basically, what we found out with PAFTing into all these instances is that we can only PAFT into an instance that has an object mapped all the way up to the 3rd floor of that instance, or therefore we will be on an invalid tile. And to find an instance that has an object on the 3rd floor is very rare. So the problem was we had to load into a 3rd floor instance, or at least something that had an object in the 3rd floor. An example of this was, although we could load into a rumble mode in NMZ since it is on the 3rd floor, well, we couldn't load into an endurance or a practice mode because those were on floor 1 and floor 2. Although we could load into the upper region of that floor where we would be frozen, as this is on the instance map no matter what floor you are on.
I'll show you what's funny too. Look what happens if I load up.
What the fuck? That would just vanish.
They just despawn.
Now this is where we relied a lot on instance maps when testing cutscenes and personalized areas, as you can scroll through the map and see if there are any objects on the 3rd floor which we would possibly PAFT into. If there were no objects, well then, we wouldn't be able to PAFT into that instance. There of course were some exceptions here, such as Galvik having a steering wheel only at the top of the ship on its 3rd floor. As well, if a POH had a dungeon and a 2nd floor above its ground level, you could then PAFT in to the roof level of that POH because its roof is an object. Another rare instance of its kind having a 3rd floor mapping was that of the Theater of Blood in the Taste of New Hope quest. Later on, after exploring this instance to its fullest, we found that there was a ladder that you could climb down, and this ladder did have a registered option that took you to a lower floor. Therefore, this would give us several more ideas to possibly take our PAFT to even a lower level floor, and maybe even hit that hope and dream of a 3 combat Inferno or Fire Cape with 0 XP. So how does a ladder attribute to a lower floor PAFT into a totally different instance than the one we're on? So we found out that some ladders work and some are unregistered. And well, as you can see in past experiences, an unregistered ladder will lead you 6,400 tiles to the north into yet another instance mapping. And well, if we could find one ladder that's registered, then go to a lower floor and find one that is unregistered, we would have the capability to PAFT into almost any instance, as almost all have a ground 1st and 2nd floor. So what did we do? Well, me and my friends Vanna and Mahler OSRS looked into cutscenes and instances we could possibly PAFT into with a 3rd floor, to then find ladders and get unregistered leaves on those. Oddly enough, once again the theory holds true that the newer content is more poorly designed than the old content, And almost every cutscene that was made within the new quest, such as Song of the Elves, well, they decided to just map the entire normal map over the cutscene, which had multiple levels. As you can see here in the arty cutscene of Song of the Elves, well, you would actually access the rooftop agility on the 3rd floor, but you could only move towards that agility obstacle if you entered Ashihama on the correct tile. Unfortunately though, as you can see here, the agility obstacle, unlike a lot of ladders within cutscenes, was a registered object, and therefore it took us all the way into the main game and to the agility course in Arty with other players around. And we had tried even places such as the Dragon Slayer 2 cutscene with the Varrock Castle, but we later found out that this wasn't completely mapped and the 3rd floor was off limits inside that castle. Now we had a lot more cutscenes in mind, such as the Tower of Life quest and Frankenstein's castle. And well, by using ladders within these cutscenes on the 3rd floor, we might have possibly had a PAFT to go into a lower floor and therefore possibly into the Inferno or Fight Caves to therefore get those low combat capes you all talk about, and maybe even that 3 combat Inferno cape. But unfortunately, this never happened, as the bug got found and patched briefly before we were about to try these cutscenes. And therefore, the hopes of a level 3 Inferno cape probably now will never exist yet again. Now, me, Mauler, and Vanna had a lot more ideas for this path that never really came to fruition because of its early patch. And well, some of those included possibly PAFTing into the Culimancer room, which is a very obscure 3rd floor instance, and therefore defeating the Culimancer on a level 3, possibly skipping the entire SP for Disaster quest, and therefore having Barrow's Gloves on a combat level 3. Another unique idea we had which never came to fruition was the possibility of maybe getting Piety done without the actual quest and therefore not needing 20 attack, and maybe making an obby tank with Piety, as once again, the Knight's Training Ground is one of those very rare 3rd floor instances that we could possibly PAFT into. But we didn't have time to train accounts to these quests before all of this got patched, and well, these ideas didn't pop up until later on throughout the discovery of this PAFT and what the 3rd floor really meant. Although some of this was a failure and we never got to hit our main goals before the end of this and its patch, well, I believe we all had a great time, and that is because we learned a lot of new ideas, such as the idea that instances can actually map backwards instead of forwards in obscure worlds. We also got to just fly around and observe some of the scenery, which of course is fun in itself. And on the topic of fun, before I end this video, I wanted to talk to you all about that quickly. I wanted to talk about something somewhat serious here. As you can tell, I haven't been doing Lower the Better videos as of recent, and there's a reason for that. When I was doing Lower the Better back in the day, I was spending a lot of time, I would say upwards of 80 hours a week, trying to get a video out just once every 2 weeks. Basically, I've had a lot of things happen over the last year, and in 2019, let's just say I don't want that to be a year that I repeat. Therefore, I wanted to speak to you all from the heart and tell you that RuneScape really hasn't been a part of my ideas lately, and to be honest, I want to continue my content, but into the real life realm, and possibly expand my creativity. And that means, well, there's going to be a lot more videos on this channel, although there still will be RuneScape videos, in fact, probably one in just another 7 days. Anyways, I hope you all still support me throughout this process, and if not, that is totally understandable. But if you did enjoy today's video, a subscription to my channel is greatly appreciated, and well, I just think honestly it was a great video to have, and I loved running around in instances and discovering new paths all the way along. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and once again I will see you again next time with a new RuneScape video.